So the new Pyro Beast 4 version 5.2 just came out and it's gonna be a bit tricky for a few people, so let us go over what you can do in order to make it easy for you to clear and get that 36 stars. Of course, quick disclaimer, retry as many times as you need to in order to get the 3 stars on specific chambers. Consider trying out different teams over multiple runs if you're having trouble getting a clear on a specific chamber or 3 stars on that area. Do not fret if you cannot get 36 stars right now, since the gain in Primo Gems and resources is quite minimal and the clear is generally what matters the most. Lastly, my account has relatively high investment both vertical and horizontal, so the clear time you see in the footage in the background will be different for different accounts. It is all dependent on how much investment your account has made. Now let's start off with floor 11. Now before we start, 2 things I want to say. Do not bring a Hydro DPS focused team for the second half because we do have the Eidolon Legends, and Beidou is particularly great on both sides regardless of where you put it, as long as you have Constellation too. For Chamber 1, you're going to be dealing with a lot of Natlan tribal humans. They will spawn clockwise, starting from front, and then they spawn to the right, back, and left. Deal with all of this respectively, and we will be moving to the second half. For the second half, you only really have like a few Saurians here and there. They'll start off with the Colosaurus and then spawn the others afterwards, but once again, very straightforward. They don't do that much damage, just kill them, then we'll move on to Chamber 2. So Chamber 2, the first half, we start off with 3 Pyro Fatui agents right in front. If you do have Beidou, you can utilize their spinning chakram thing attack in order to trigger the perfect parry. Otherwise, any sort of grouping here would be very much appreciated. They do have slightly boosted Pyro resistance, but they do take more damage against physical. Afterwards, they'll spawn 3 Saurians at the back. Also straightforward, they're not that strong, just kill them. And then they'll spawn the last wave of Ruin Snakes. If you're lucky, all of them will do some sort of attack that doesn't put them to dig underground. And if they do dig underground, just try to hug one or the other so that they can appear right next to each other. Then we move on to the second half. So second half, we have the Eroding Avatar of Lava, aka the rock version. It does have a pyro mechanic where if you build up the bar enough with pyro attacks, it will instantly die. But if your team is well built enough, this mechanic is essentially irrelevant. Then afterwards, they'll spawn 2 Ruin Drake, the flying variants. You can use bow characters in order to shoot down the 2 weak points on the side of the wings, but it is not necessary because you can still hit their tail just fine. Now, Chamber 3, for the first half, we have 2 Aramite melee elites. Kill them, nothing special, and then we'll move on to the 2 Kairagis, which does have the soul link mechanic. If you kill one Kairagi too fast and don't kill the other one in time, they will enter essentially an empowered state where they will be immune to any sort of crowd control and they'll regain all their HP back. So it is ideal for you to try to do damage to both of them at the same time, or if you're running a single target team, you can focus on one and then focus on the other and then eventually time it so that you can kill them both within a short span of time. Once again, Beidou here is absolutely amazing. Now for the second half, we do have the double Eidolon Legends. When you start off, just go for the Jug Eidolon so that the other melee Eidolon will go to you regardless. Xiangling is particularly great here due to the ability of consistently performing vapes without needing a Hydro unit, or you can use any sort of Pyro DPS just don't bring any Hydro DPS, otherwise you will essentially be doing 0 damage. Okay, quick disclaimer for Floor 12. I've tried every single possible combo running 4-star only teams with 4-star only weapons, and I can tell you that this is going to be particularly hard for anyone who tries to do that. So if you do have high investment, preferably C6 or 5-star weapons, just use them all you can, because I've decided after trying a lot of different runs, I can't really find a team that works for only first half and second half. So I highly recommend you to do multiple runs with 2 different teams, specifically to tackle very specific chambers, notably one for chamber 2 and one for chamber 3, and of course one for chamber 1, because all of them are difficult in their own way. So yeah, the footage you're about to see are going to be for the 5-star only team, because I do not see how it is possible to actually get 36 stars with 4-star only units without running 2 different teams. Now let's get into it. So chamber 1, first half, we have 2 fluid avatars of lava that will spawn in front of you that are permanently pyro infused, bringing hydro characters in order to trigger like certain reactions like vaporize or electro for overloaded would be nice, but hydro I think is preferred here because overloaded is a pyro explosion, so they will take less damage for that. They have relatively high pyro resistance, but they're not immune to it. But just don't try to run a pyro-centric DPS unless you have some sort of Red Shredder like Kazuha and Xilonen together. Of course, you can do the edge baiting that I did recommend in the previous Abyss guide, but due to how much bullet sponge or how much enemies that we have in the first half, I recommend you to just go straight for it and kill them as fast as possible. So afterwards, the 2 Aeromite elites, one being the Dendro and the Pyro lady, will spawn around the middle. They'll start with an enhanced state with higher resistance, they take more damage to physical, and of course they have more resistance to their own elements. They'll summon the 2 respective beasts or the Pokemons. You want to focus as Pokemons, kill them, and they will be stunned for the next 10 seconds, lose a third of the HP and a lot of resistance. They will also take more damage to physical and their own respective resistance. Now lastly, the 2 Consecrated Beasts, the Crocodile and the Bird, will spawn all the way at the back. They will take a bit of time to start in an enhanced state, and they'll have boosted resistance, especially high resistance against their own respective element. What you want to do is really just stay all the way to the back at the corner of the Abyss, because the Crocodile and Bird will do their own respective attacks that will actually run towards you. So try to hug the wall at the back so that they can stay close to you. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. Just do damage, kill them, and of course, each Consecrated Beast does have their special move. Hit those blocks and then hit them again to make them lose a lot of health and stun them for the next 10 seconds. Then, once you're done with this, we will move on to the second half. So, we start off with 2 adult Geovishaps, both Hydro and Electro, with boosted physical and Geo resistance. So, you can H-bait them to push them towards the wall, but because of who is going to be coming up next, ideally I recommend you to kind of just keep them roughly around the center. If you have a shield, that is an added advantage, so that when they do the rolling move, when they hit you, they'll get stunned for a few seconds, but it's not really that necessary. After you kill these 2, the Primo Vishap will spawn directly at the center. This is the Electro variant, so it will have boosted Geo, Physical, and Electro Res. It takes about 10 seconds to get up, so you can use that time to charge up your team's burst whenever you can. Now, if you do play Circle Impact with the likes of Bennett, try to be to its side or run around it, so that it actually does attacks that put it in place. And of course, shields here are at added advantage. And of course, when it does the Primordial Shower attack, aka Discharging Beam attack, if you have any Electro or Geo shield, the attack that hits the shield will cause him to rebound, take damage, and lose a lot of resistance for the next 5 seconds. If you want to get Electro shields, you can always rely on Electro Crystallize, having Beidou's Constellation 1, or just bring any Geo shield like Noel or Zhongli. But if you don't have any of these options, just do an iframe with any elemental burst. Okay, this is kind of funny, but there's an extra tip that I can give for any Chasca players for the Primo Vishap. So you can actually get hit if you just regularly tap the skill and fly normally, because the Primo Vishap's hitbox is just that big. But what you can do is that when you start flying, you go to its back, and because its back is elevated, you can actually slowly ride up due to how Chasca's flight work, and you can essentially charge your charge attack while the Primo Vishap just doesn't know what to do. Make sure you're on top of him if you really want to take advantage of this really funny mechanic. I don't know why, but I think the AI has not been updated to account that Chasca can actually fly above him. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. Once you kill him, we move on to Chamber 2. So for the first half, we have the Goldflame Qucusaur Tyrant. It's a very big red bird with relatively high Pyro res. It will start off in an empowered form, turning into a small bird with a Pyro shield, flying at essentially what I consider to be unhittable range. It is generally impossible to hit this with ranged units unless you stand on Zhongli Pillar and use any ranged units that apply Hydro, or you fly up using Wanderer, but I highly advise against doing that. Just wait for it to do the Feather Barrage attack, which is the first one, and then afterwards it will spawn 2 feathers. One of the Pyro feathers will always be shot towards you, while the other will be shot far away. So you can strategize around saving your abilities in order to do so. I personally recommend Hydro Catalyst characters like Mona, Barbara, or Neuvillette, since you don't actually have to aim or use abilities in order to trigger them. All you have to do is use your normal attack. What you can also do is use either Xingqiu or Yelan's burst paired up together with a range unit, maybe preferably a bow unit, and use the lock-on feature in the game to shoot the Pyro feathers from far away. Once you break both feathers, it'll go to low altitude, hit it with Hydro elemental hits preferably in order to break the Pyro shield, but in the run that you're seeing right now, it is very much possible to break it with Electro, just a bit more tricky. After you break the shield, it will return back to its original form and be stunned for the next 20 seconds, and then the rest is pretty straightforward. Do your rotations, do your damage, try to hug it because most of its attacks is just it slamming and swiping its wings, and then once you kill it, we move on to the second half. So the second half has the introduction of the latest boss, the Tenebrous Papilla Type 1, or what I like to call the Mimic Plant. So it does have a special mechanic and attack called, I believe, the Affliction status or the Affection status, whatever it's called. Essentially, when it hits you in its mimic form, it will build up a stack onto you where you will lose every percentage of HP for how many stacks you have, plus a flat amount of damage. So try to be careful in how much hits you're going to take because it is possible for you to basically lose half your health and just die. Think of it as kind of like a delayed corrosion, except it can instantly delete you if you're not careful. It will start off with this charge up attack for the next 13 seconds. It's essentially a Night Soul shield. Elemental attacks will be counted as 1 hit, but Night Soul attacks will be considered as 3 value per hit. So for the next 13 seconds, what you want to do is try to break this shield. Preferably Natlan characters are the best, but the only one that I can really use is really Auroron and Chasca. Chasca is particularly great here. I'm not so sure about Molani. I think Kinish can build it perfectly well, so I can't really say much in that regard. If you don't have any Natlan characters, I did test a few different teams in order to help you clear. So in the clear run that you see right now, I run an 4-star overloaded team with Bennett Shangling Fischl and I believe it was Keqing. It almost barely cleared. I nearly died there, but it requires a lot of hits here and there, and granted that my Bennett is C6, so it does build up the bar a little bit. Fischl's slot in any electro reactions based team is generally a great option due to her Ascension 4 passive, and if you do have a Constellation 6, that is going to be an added bonus because it increases the rate that Oz fires at the boss. You could also opt to run any general Electro-Charged teams, but make sure that you have enough DPS to be able to clear the boss in time. A few other teams I tested on the overall variant is like a Xingqiu Yelan with Yoimiya, Chlorine Aggravate with Fischl, and any national variant I think is generally going to be pretty good. But if you can't do this, then just count 30 seconds and try to use your burst to iframe it. Or if you genuinely cannot break the shield in any way possible, consider running all the way to the outer part of the floor because you would be able to dodge the attack when it happens so you don't actually die. And afterwards, you can just continue on and just do your rotation and it'll eventually do that move again, but until that happens, you don't have to worry about it. But ideally, if you can get it stunned for the next maybe 15 seconds, then that's going to be your best DPS window. So an honorable mention team against the Mimic Plant would be the Thundering Furry Razor team. This one does require a C6 Bennett for the Pyro Infusion, and of course the Endo Traveler. You could probably use Nahida and it will have a bit of a better success, but I used the Endo Traveler instead. The team was able to consistently break the Mimic Plant's charge shield thing, but it's not good enough to actually clear within the time in order for me to get the 3 stars on Chamber 2, even when I run Neuvillette Super Hyper Carry on the first half. But that's one thing that you can try if you do have this team built. One more honorable mention against the Mimic Plant boss is actually any burning teams. So aside from having Kinish burning or having an Emily in your team, any burning team would be able to shred the shield pretty fast due to how burning works. So if you do want to break the shield really fast and your team's DPS is not enough or you don't have any other options for this guy, then burning is an option that you can consider. So Chamber 3, the annoying Geo-check Golden Wolflord has returned. Range units here, especially DPS, have somewhat of an advantage, but sometimes it cannot be consistent due to the lock-on range limit in the mechanic. But if you do run like Yoimiya Vape here, you probably will have a good time doing damage, or maybe use the likes of Neuvillette. In this particular run, I ran Chlorine Aggravate and her shots were able to kind of do a decent amount of damage. At least it was able to lock on enough to trigger the hits. So he does have a mechanic where if it hits you, it will apply the corrosion effect, which is essentially a team-wide HP drain which triggers through your shield and you can actually die. So unless you can dodge, it is preferable to at least have some sort of healer to keep yourself alive. Once it is at least at 70% HP or below, it will enter an invulnerable phase where it will summon 3 Geo Skulls across the map. They can be charged with any elemental hits, preferably Geo is going to be the best, while non-Geo units are going to take, if I look at the math based on the units, 1 Geo hit is 3 GUs and then non-Geo is like 38 GUs, which is like over 10 times more, so you're not going to be having a good time. Preferably try to bring any Geo unit that is good. Kachina is okay, but I don't recommend it due to her cooldown. Ningguang in Noel is particularly great. Zhongli, you do have to do a play around where you put the pillar at the side and then you save the burst for another one. And then you wait for your pillar to trigger the first skull and then you can resummon the pillar next to the third one. That's the only way that you can use it if you do want to bring Zhongli for this. For the third skull, I recommend waiting for the Wolflord to do the Geo explosion attack, otherwise your pillar will be destroyed as shown in the footage right now, and you'll have to wait a few more seconds to call it back again, thus giving you less time for the second half. Xilonen is also another good option that you can bring for the Golden Wolflord, although the best rotation that I find is you want to use your burst first, if assuming you have enough energy to build it up later if you're using a Furina team or team that needs the healing, and then afterwards use your skill and make sure the dash itself actually hits a skull and then do one normal attack. You can casually stroll over to the second skull, do not sprint because this will consume your Night Soul point very fast, and you need to do about 3 to 4 hits due to ICD. And then for the third skull, you'll have to wait a little bit for Xilonen's cooldown, but her cooldown is not really that long, so you should be able to break it in a jiffy. So Noel here is particularly nice, and now here is the rotation you want to do for Noel. So of course you wait for the skulls to come out, watch for the direction, swap to Noel immediately, try to save your burst in order to actually break one of the skulls. Use skill directly next to the skull into the burst that should break the skull instantly. Then here I swap to Xingqiu to bunny hop to the second skull and then just do like 3 hits and it should be sufficient. Rinse and repeat, and Noel I think is one of the fastest Geo breaker aside from maybe Ningguang. Goro is also a nice option, especially because he's the only bow unit that is actually Geo. So you would be able to take down the skulls at a distance, although not particularly comfortable because the Wolflord is going to be sending out a few projectiles that will trigger corrosion if it does hit you. But if you don't have any Geo units, here's a few things that I've tried that can charge a skull consistently fast. Nahida Hyperbloom does work, but it's a little bit situational. You'll have to pair Nahida with 2 normals into a charge attack or N2C on top of Xingqiu's Rain Sword on top of having Cookie's skill. You can use Xingqiu's Rain Sword from the skill, you don't necessarily need a burst, and the reason why I recommend N2C for Nahida is because her charge attack has a separate ICD, so it does help build it quite a bit. Ayaka with a sprinting and the infused normal attack is quite decent, and surprisingly, Furina's Salon Solitaire or her summons from her skill is pretty decent at charging. And I would say the other one that I can recommend is Chlorine in the Turn Aggravate team, because surprisingly Chlorine together with Fischl was able to build up the skulls quite fast despite not being a Geo unit. So second half we have the Aeonblight Drake. You know the drill and so do I. Just bring a bow unit, shoot the 2 weak points to bring it down, and then do rinse and repeat. You can also shoot this weak spot when it charges its one move while it's flying, but that very rarely happens. And if you're lucky, Furina summons can hit them in the right time when it's flying. I don't know how it does it, but the fact that it can do it is something that you can keep in mind. And whenever he charges this move after doing in melee grounded mode for a while, hit its face to stun it. Don't let it fully charge, otherwise it will gain boosted resistance to the element that did the most damage to it. If you do let that happen, you can wait for it to fly up and once again shoot the two weak spots, otherwise you're probably better off retrying. And the rest is pretty straightforward. To sum things up, the first half of Lot 12 wants both either Hydro and Geo, which is perfect if you do run Neuvillette and Zhongli together, while the second half is essentially made for Chasca since you do need a bear unit and a Natlan DPS that is able to chug out a lot of Natlan or Night Soul aligned DPS specifically against the Mimic plant. Now, I think this current Abyss is a bit too difficult for me to run like a 4-star Oni team. If you want to do that, maybe get like more constellations, at least like C6 of all your 4-star units with some 5-star weapons, because I don't think it's very possible to run 4-star Oni weapons with that current level of investment. But if you do have a 5-star unit or a well-built 5-star DPS, feel free to use them to your advantage. Otherwise, I think that's it for now. If you guys know of any tips and guides that you saw from somewhere else, feel free to share it down in the comment section below, because I feel like there's going to be a lot of people out there who really wants to find as much advice as possible in order to clear and get 36 star for this Spiral Abyss. I think that's it for the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.